Last night towards the end of Game 2 with the Warriors and the Kings, Domantas Sabonis and Draymond Green got tangled up on this play, and ultimately it appeared that Draymond stepped down on Sabonis' chest. In this video, we're going to take a closer look at the potential injuries and anatomy of what could happen with something like this. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and in this video, let's dive straight in to some anatomy and possibilities here with Sabonis. After the game, we heard from Woj that Sabonis had undergone some x-rays, specifically mentioning the sternum. Those looked clean, but they're going to do some other tests as a precaution. So let's talk about the sternum, the ribs, and some of the other anatomy we could worry about with a stomp or getting stepped on like this. So of course, during this play, this is controversial, right? Sabonis clearly does grab Draymond's leg. I'd argue that some of this is because Sabonis is falling down to the ground and he's almost more turning to grab and cover himself up because he thinks the other Warriors player here is going to fall on top of him. So I think the arms kind of going out in front of him here at this point is more just reactionary. He's trying to reach around and cover up his head to prevent getting hit from a fall. Remember earlier in the game, Sabonis got hit and looked to have some sort of bruise, damage to maybe his temporomandibular joint with how he was moving his jaw around. So I think the initial reach was more reflexive, precautionary. He was falling. He didn't want somebody else to fall and land on his head. Of course, then you can debate, he doesn't let go right away. And so then that, of course, leads to Draymond coming down and looking like he's stepping on him. This, to me, is more egregious than the grab. But let's go straight to the anatomy. Where Draymond steps appears to be more the lower right chest of Sabonis as opposed to directly square on the sternum. The sternum is going to be that big bone in the center of the chest, the breastbone in the center of the rib cage. And it really looks like more the impact from Draymond comes lower on the right portion, kind of down even at the upper abdomen, as opposed to directly on the sternum. Now, one good thing here, of course, when a force is coming through, when you're talking about true compression or that load from stepping, it matters sort of what's going on the back end of where that force is. So the fact that Sabonis' right side of his lower body is raised up off the court, think of this more as a punch to the lower portion of Sabonis' chest as opposed to truly the force of being stepped on. If you're flat on the ground and you get stepped on, because the hard floor is behind you, all of that force is being delivered into the body. As opposed to here, when the step comes in, Sabonis' body is able to give a little bit. You can see that initial sort of downward motion, which is going to probably put more of that load through the ribs as opposed to transmitting into the organs. Looking at our biodigital anatomy tool here, let's first talk about the sternum, because those are the x-rays that we read about. There are three components to the sternum, which is, again, that breastbone in the center of the chest. There's the manubrium of the sternum, which is going to be this upper portion. There's the body of the sternum, which is here in the middle. And then there's the xiphoid process, which is all the way down at the very bottom, the small little piece of bone coming off. Technically, you could maybe think of these as joints, but they're not really moving mobile like we think of a true knee joint. But there are three distinct separate pieces. Of course, the purpose of the breastbone here, it's protecting the heart. The heart is sitting directly behind it. Fractures can certainly occur to the sternum, but it takes a lot of force, like baseball in the chest, car accident, major types of trauma to result in a sternal fracture. Also, x-rays might not always pick it up because an x-ray projection, you're shooting straight onto the chest. And so if there's any elevation in the sternum, you might not clearly see it. So I suspect that's some of this additional evaluation, is to maybe look with more detail at the sternum. Again, though, I'm more concerned about contusions, possible injury to the ribs, the liver down in this lower sort of right portion of the chest, upper right quadrant of the abdomen. When we talk about our ribs, we have 12 pairs of ribs on each side. Ribs 1 through 7 are considered true ribs because the rib comes around and pretty much goes straight into the sternum where it has an articulation in the front of the chest. Ribs 8, 9, and 10 are considered false ribs. That's because these ribs down lower are not really going directly up into the sternum. Instead, they have this indirect connection through this costal cartilage down here to sort of connect with the rib higher above it. So we think of these as false ribs. And then all the way down at the very bottom, ribs 11 and 12 are floating ribs. Floating ribs because there's nothing connected to them in the front of the chest. They just wrap around from the vertebral spine and they're basically floating in the front side of the chest. Now there's muscles coming off of this area, but there's no bony articulation or joint at the front side of these floating ribs. And always remember, with these direct impacts, these direct blows, it's not just the bones on the surface that can become injured. That energy is going to get transferred deeper into the body, and so you can actually get something called a pulmonary contusion, where the lung can become bruised, and you can even get an injury to the liver, which is sitting directly behind the rib cage down lower. So that's probably what more of this precautionary evaluation we heard about is going to be. checking in on things, looking at the abdominal testing, making sure there's no concern for like a liver contusion or a liver injury, and then evaluating those lower ribs, because that really does seem to be the area where Draymond's foot came down as opposed to directly over the sternum. Assuming there is no liver injury, there's no pulmonary contusion, even if there is just a rib contusion or rib injury, we treat those often symptomatically in terms of when somebody can come back and play. So the chances of there being a rib fracture here are going to be slim. And honestly, even if there was a rib fracture, we still treat them symptomatically in terms of when somebody can come back and return. So unless there's some sort of underlying organ injury that gets discovered later today with these more evaluation tests, I would not expect this to be a long-term thing for Sabonis. Could definitely be a dangerous play, but should be okay going forward the rest of the playoffs. Let me know down below what you guys think, if this anatomy was helpful, and also tell me your comments about this whole who grabbed whose leg. I think both guys are at fault, honestly. To me, Draymond carries more fault just because it was more aggressive to step down as opposed to, I really thought Sabonis was reaching around to sort of protect his head and cover up, and just so happened to loop around Draymond's legs. He should have let go sooner, so he's not completely innocent here, but let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know any other questions or comments, and until next time, I'll see you later. Bye.